Man. Grande Mesquite. Grande Mesquite.
Despite their precarious situation, they haven't lost their smiles.
Aujourd'hui qu'on est devant une autre réalité, un autre monde moderne, bien sûr qu'on doit répondre à ces exigences modernes tout en gardant le fond qui est la quête du savoir. Et surtout le savoir religieux, puisqu'on ne peut pas pratiquer une chose, le pratiquer bien, le respecter sans le connaître.
Amin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Rahmanirrahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghayril maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Saja Rasulullahi wal fatwarat nas yadkhulu fi dinillahi balaghan nas.
Here is the straw that broke the camel's back. Army liberates chained talibés. Marabou chains up talibés and voyages. These chains around the ankles of children reminded more than one person of the island of Gorée and its dark history with the transatlantic slave trade. This boat is the only transportation between Gorée and Dakar, separated by approximately 3 miles of Atlantic Ocean. The island's original name, Ber, was changed to De La Palma by the Portuguese, and eventually changed again, this time by the Dutch, to the current title of Gorée. Visitors from all over the world come to Gorée to remind themselves of the baseness of which humanity is capable. Specifically, in this case, the Europeans, whose ancestors initiated this shameful human commerce. For the African diaspora, Gorée is a symbol, a place of pilgrimage. The vibrant colors and lush greenery of the island have not been diminished over the centuries, despite the exploitative inhabitation of the Portuguese since 1444, followed by the Dutch, the English, and finally, the French. To protect the island from other Europeans, the inhabitants installed, at various moments in history, a number of cannons pointing in several directions. Africans themselves were not entirely passive in this sordid commerce. Many were killed, villages burned, simply for refusing to sell their own flesh and blood. On the other hand, the useless trinkets offered by European slave traders did tempt a good many, who offered their brothers and sisters in exchange. Whether they acted out of ignorance, cruelty, or simple greed, the result is well known. An inestimable suffering that began with a forced walk to the coast and ended in a life sentence of forced labor and humiliation. This is the door through which a large portion of the black people now populating the Americas passed before disappearing into this small fortress, constructed in 1776 by the Dutch for the purpose of examining and detaining abducted Africans from all along the west coast of the continent. This tiny room, just 6 feet by 6 feet, was reserved for men. It held from 15 to 30 of them, lined up against the walls, chains about their arms and necks. Here is the girls' room. In fact, girls were more valuable and therefore separated from women. The value of a woman was dependent on her breasts, a girl on her virginity. Children were also separated from parents and locked in this narrow chamber, where the mortality rate was the highest of any of the rooms in the fortress. This tiny hole in the wall was the children's only source of daylight. This type of chain was attached to a slave who wished to go to the toilet located outside the fortress. In the center of the chain was a large iron ball, which would have to be carried in the slaves' hands and dragged behind their feet. The wait at the slave fortress could take 3 months or more, depending on the buyers in the United States and the Caribbean. And when the moment of departure arrived, this door was the last to pass through. It has since been named the Door of No Return. Only the ancestors can say for sure how many Africans passed through this door. The European slave traders did not keep an exact head count, and historians continue to debate over approximations. The figures vary between 300,000 and 20 million people. But there is one thing on which we can all agree. Whatever the number, it was far too many, and although their names are lost, their legacy of suffering will never be forgotten. Inscribed today as a historical center on UNESCO's list of World Heritage, the slave house at Gorée Island would never have received that denomination without the indefatigable courage of Joseph Boubacar Ndiaye. For decades now, Mr. Ndiaye has struggled to keep the slave house intact, a permanent reminder of the atrocities so many would prefer to forget. Upon seeing the image of the talibés in chains, he cannot hold his tongue. Indignant, he describes the situation.
Ce que vous dites au niveau de l'esclavage infantile, c'est vrai, ça existe. Chez nous, en Afrique, il n'y a pas qu'en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est partout en Afrique de l'Ouest. Ouais, le cas qui s'est passé tout récemment à Dakar, des gosses qui sont confiés à un certain marabout. Ce marabout, en allant un peu loin de son fief, les a menottés, comme du temps des esclaves. Donc c'est de l'esclavage moderne.
Le problème de l'esclavage, au vouloir, par exemple, le lancer comme ça dans n'importe quelle pratique en Afrique, on aurait parlé de tant de cas pour parler de l'esclavage. Dans les prisons, c'est l'administration pénitentiaire, c'est l'État. Et les hommes sont entassés dans certaines chambres, 9 et 10 par exemple à la prison de Dakar, pour parler d'un cas précis. Les hommes sont entassés comme dans une boîte de sardines. C'est de l'esclavage. Ils sont maltraités. On ne les soigne pas. C'est comme si être en prison veut dire être esclave. Et on a retrouvé cette pratique en brousse. Des gens laissés pour compte, qui n'ont pas de l'eau à boire, qui n'ont pas de l'eau potable, qui n'ont pas de quoi à manger. Il y a une faim terrible, vous voyez. Et des gens qui payent leurs impôts, en tout cas à un moment où ils peuvent le payer, qui s'acquittent de leurs droits de citoyenneté, qui sont des citoyens et qu'on a laissés à un moment où d'autres s'enrichissent facilement dans les maîtres d'État. Pourquoi ces traitements de certains qui sont encore les seigneurs de notre temps moderne et d'autres qui sont les esclaves de notre temps moderne? Ça, on peut le trouver dans beaucoup de pratiques. Mais si je l'analyse, je ne dis pas que c'est la religion, je ne dis pas que c'est le marabout, je ne dis pas que c'est l'administration, mais j'essaie de le poser autrement.
Je préfère même, personnellement, voir mon enfant au carcan à l'âge